My name is Hilda, and if you're listening to this, I want you to know something. Family isn't always what it seems. 3 days ago, my son Damien and his wife Melissa tried to kill me. They pushed my husband Henry and me off a 90-foot cliff. When I hit the ground, I thought I was dead. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Every bone in my body screamed. Then I heard Henry's voice, broken, barely a whisper. "Hilda, don't move. Play dead." And I did. I laid there, covered in dirt and blood, pretending to be gone, while the 2 people I loved most in the world walked away believing they'd finished us. But what came after, what Henry told me as we lay there bleeding, shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. For 40 years, Henry and I had built what I believed was a perfect life, a cozy little house in a quiet town, the smell of fresh coffee every morning, kids' laughter echoing through the halls. I taught at the local elementary school. I loved my students like they were my own. Henry ran a small carpentry shop, his hands rough but gentle, crafting furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. We had 2 sons, Richard, our firstborn, full of light and laughter, and Damien, 5 years younger, quieter, more reserved, but just as loved. Sundays were sacred. After church, we'd all sit at the oak table Henry built himself. Richard would share his big dreams of becoming an engineer. Damien would mostly stay silent, picking at his food. I used to think he was just shy. I didn't see the darkness already growing inside him. Life was simple, beautiful, and cruelly deceptive. When Richard turned 20, everything changed. I started noticing whispers between the brothers. Heated, secretive. They'd stop talking the second I walked into the room. Henry brushed it off. "Boys fight, Hilda. It'll pass." But it didn't. And then one night, Richard didn't come home. We searched everywhere. The woods, the river trail, the gorge near the old bridge. I still remember the sound of the sheriff's knock at dawn. They found him, at the bottom of the gorge. They said it was an accident, a misstep in the dark. I wanted to believe that, because the truth, the one I didn't know until 25 years later, was so much worse. Richard's funeral broke something inside me. I wore my mother's old black dress and cried until I had nothing left. Damien stood beside me, silent, too silent. His face was empty. Not grief, not pain, just emptiness. Henry stayed strong for both of us. He held my hand, whispered that we'd survive, that our family would heal, and somehow we did, or at least I thought we did. Damien became a different person after Richard's death. Kinder, more attentive. He'd help around the house, bring flowers, fix things without being asked. I thought it was his way of coping. I didn't realize it was guilt hiding behind kindness. Years passed. The pain faded into something dull and bearable. Damien married a sweet girl, Melissa. They had 2 children. For the first time in decades, our house was full of laughter again. I felt whole, finally, until 6 months ago. That's when it started. The small, careful manipulation. It began when Henry and I decided to update our will. We had saved our whole lives, about $200,000 between the house, land, and savings. We wanted to leave something for our grandchildren. It was Damien's idea. "Mom, Dad, you're both getting older. You should make sure everything's in order," he said, with that soft smile that now haunts me. Melissa held my hand and said, "We just want to protect you." How naive I was to think those words came from love. They insisted we name them as sole heirs. "So it'll be easier to manage things when you're older." Henry agreed. I didn't. Something about it didn't feel right. But love blinds you. Trust blinds you more. We signed the papers anyway. And from that day forward, something inside me changed. A whisper of dread I couldn't explain. Then came the pressure. "Mom, this house is too big for you two," Melissa said one afternoon. her eyes scanning the furniture like she was already appraising it. "You should sell it and move closer to town." Henry thought it made sense, but I couldn't imagine leaving the place that held my entire life. Our memories, our love, our sons. When I refused, Damien's tone changed. "Mom, you're being irrational. What if something happens to you here alone?" It was the first time my son, my sweet little boy, spoke to me like I was a burden. I started to see it then. The calculation behind his concern. The way Melissa always asked about our bank accounts, our insurance. The way Damien always smiled. Too wide, too forced. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. And when I finally confronted Henry about it, that's when the truth began to unravel. It happened late one night, as we were washing dishes. "Henry," I said quietly, "do you think Damien's behavior seems strange lately?" He didn't answer right away. He just stared at the sink, the plate in his hands trembling. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "There's something I never told you about Richard's death." My blood went cold. "What do you mean?" He turned, his face pale. That night, Damien wasn't in his room like he told us. I followed him. I saw him by the gorge. He and Richard were fighting. I couldn't breathe. Fighting about what? Henry's eyes filled with tears. "Money, Hilda." Richard found out Damien was stealing from the family savings. He confronted him, and then I saw Richard fall. Damien said it was an accident. He begged me to believe him. I dropped the plate. It shattered across the floor. "You believed him?" I whispered. Henry nodded. "He was our son. I thought he'd learned his lesson. But I was wrong." The room spun around me. My knees buckled. My entire world, every memory, every belief, collapsed in a single breath. And then Henry said the words that made my blood turn to ice. "Hilda, Damien's business is failing. He's desperate. I think he's planning something terrible." I didn't sleep that night. Henry's confession echoed in my mind like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. My son, my Damien, had killed his own brother, and for 25 years, we'd lived beside a murderer, smiled at him, hugged him, celebrated birthdays and Christmases with him. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to move. Every sound in the house felt sinister. Even the ticking clock sounded like a countdown. And then, the phone rang. It was Damien. His voice was calm, cheerful, too calm. "Hey Mom," he said. "Melissa and I were talking. You and Dad never had a proper 40th anniversary trip. How about a weekend in the mountains? You've always loved hiking. It'll be fun, just family time." Family time. The words felt like poison. Henry and I looked at each other in silence, both understanding what that invitation really meant. A trip that would end with our bodies at the bottom of a ravine. Another tragic accident, just like Richard's. "That's very sweet, honey," I managed to whisper, my voice shaking. "Let me think about it, okay?" When I hung up, Henry and I just stared at each other. "He's going to do it there," I said. Henry nodded, pale as a ghost. "In the mountains." Just like Richard, the next few days were torture. Damien and Melissa came by constantly, all smiles and fake warmth. Melissa brought cookies and hiking supplies. Damien checked our car, pretending to make sure it was safe for the trip. I felt like prey being circled by wolves. "Mom," Melissa said sweetly one afternoon, holding my hand, "you're going to love the view. It's one of the safest trails. Perfect for you and Dad." Her voice dripped with honey, but her eyes were ice. I wanted to scream, to throw them out of the house, but Henry squeezed my hand and whispered, "We can't show fear. Not yet." That night, he showed me what he'd done. He had hidden his phone in a small cloth bag. "I'll keep it recording," he said. "If we survive, it'll be proof. And if we don't, at least the truth won't die with us." I wanted to beg him not to go, but deep down, I knew he was right. If we refused the trip, Damien would find another way. At least this way, we could prepare. Saturday came too soon. Damien's car pulled up at dawn, the engine humming like death's lullaby. He walked in whistling, the same tune he used to hum as a boy. "Morning, lovebirds," he said, flashing that wide, false smile. "Ready for your big adventure?" Melissa followed, radiant and perfect as ever. She carried a picnic basket full of sandwiches, fruit, and a brand new digital camera. "I want to capture every moment of this special day," she said. If only she knew how those words burned into my mind. We drove for 2 hours, through winding roads, deep forests, and rocky hills. Melissa sang along with the radio. Damien told jokes. Henry held my hand the whole way. I tried to memorize every detail, the smell of pine trees, the rhythm of Henry's heartbeat, because I didn't know if I'd ever feel them again. When we arrived at the trail, everything looked beautiful, too beautiful. The sun shimmered on the river, birds sang in the trees, the mountains stretched endlessly ahead, calm, silent witnesses to whatever was about to happen. Melissa handed us water bottles and smiled. "Stay hydrated, okay?" Her voice trembled with false sweetness. Damien strapped his backpack on. I saw the ropes, carabiners, even a small shovel. "What's all that for?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Safety stuff," he replied smoothly. "Just in case someone slips." Henry met my eyes. We both knew exactly what he meant. The hike started slow. Melissa walked ahead, snapping photos. Henry and I followed behind, our breaths heavy, our steps cautious. Damien walked last, close enough to keep us safe, but far enough to push if he wanted to. Every time I turned around, he smiled. That same smile that had fooled me for years. "Doing okay, Mom?" he'd ask. "Want to stop and rest?" It was mockery disguised as concern. After about an hour, the path narrowed. On one side, a steep drop. On the other, dense forest. Melissa turned, pretending to admire the view. "It's so beautiful up here," she said. "Don't you think, Hilda?" I looked out at the valley below. It was breathtaking and terrifying. "Yes," I whispered. "Beautiful." That's when I felt Damien's hand brush my shoulder. A simple, gentle touch. But my entire body froze. Henry must have seen my face, because he moved closer, slipping his arm around me. "Let's rest here for a bit," he said quickly. "We're not as young as we used to be." Damien's smile faltered. "Sure," he muttered. "Take your time." We sat on a fallen log, pretending to catch our breath. I leaned toward Henry and whispered, "He's going to do it soon." "I know," he said quietly. When we reached the lookout, he nodded. "That's where Richard died, Hilda. That's where Damien took him." My stomach dropped. I could barely breathe. The same gorge. The same plan. 25 years later, he was repeating his crime. I wanted to run, but where? We were miles from the car, surrounded by wilderness. Damien controlled everything, so we kept walking. By the time we reached the lookout, the sun was high. The drop below was dizzying. I could hear the river rushing far beneath the cliff. Melissa handed me the camera. "Let's take a family photo," she said cheerfully. "Henry, you stand there with Hilda. Damien will set the timer." Henry hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Sure." Damien placed the camera on a rock, adjusted the angle, then walked toward us. Slow, deliberate steps. He stood behind me. I could feel his breath on my neck. "Mom," he said softly, "do you trust me?" My heart stopped. Henry's hand tightened around mine. "Damien," he began, but Damien pushed him aside. The world spun. My feet slipped. For one horrifying second, I felt nothing but air beneath me. Then, Henry's voice. "Hilda!" He grabbed me, his fingers digging into my wrist, just as Damien lunged again. Henry's weight shifted, and suddenly we were both falling. The sky, the trees, Damien's face. all twisted together into one blur of light and terror. And then, darkness. When I opened my eyes, everything hurt. My ribs, my legs, even my breath. Blood filled my mouth. I tried to move but couldn't. Beside me, Henry was barely conscious. "Hilda," he whispered, his voice ragged. "Don't move. Play dead." I saw movement above us. Shadows on the cliff edge. Damien's voice. "Is it done?" Melissa's reply. "Yes." "They're not moving." Their voices faded as they walked away, laughing softly, like a couple leaving a picnic. And there I lay, surrounded by dirt and blood, realizing the two people we had loved the most had come to finish what they started decades ago. But Henry was still alive, and somehow, so was I. I don't remember how long I lay there. Minutes? Hours? The world had gone silent, except for the faint whisper of the river below, and Henry's ragged breathing beside me. When I finally turned my head, his eyes were open, bloodshot but alive. "Hilda," he whispered. "We have to move." I tried to sit up, but pain shot through my body like fire. My leg was twisted, my ribs cracked, blood running down my face. "I can't," I said, trembling. "You have to," he insisted. "They'll come back to check." That single thought, Damien returning to finish the job, gave me strength I didn't know I had. Henry pulled me up, his arm trembling with effort. We leaned on each other, staggering toward the forest. Every step was agony, every breath burned. We followed the faint sound of water, knowing the river might lead us back to the road. But before we disappeared into the trees, I looked back, at the cliff, at the place my son had tried to erase me from the world. And I swore silently, "I will not die here. Not today. Not by your hands, Damien." The forest swallowed us whole. Branches scraped our skin. The ground was slick with mud. But somehow, inch by inch, we moved. The sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched long and cold. Henry stumbled more than once. His breathing was shallow. "Henry," I said softly, "you're bleeding too much." He smiled weakly. "Don't worry about me, love. Just keep moving." I could hear him struggling to stay conscious. His steps slowed, his body trembling. And then, he fell. I knelt beside him, cradling his head. "Henry, please, stay with me." His hand found mine, weak and cold. "Hilda," he whispered, "you have to live. Promise me." Tears blurred my vision. "No! We'll make it together." But he shook his head. "You still have to tell the truth. You have to make them pay." And then, he stopped breathing. The silence that followed broke something inside me. For a moment, I wanted to lie down and let the forest take me too. But then I remembered the recording, Henry's phone. With shaking hands, I reached into his jacket pocket. The cloth bag was still there, the phone's red light faintly blinking. Proof, his final gift. I pressed my lips to his forehead. "I'll finish this," I whispered. "I swear." I walked alone for hours, crawling, limping, bleeding, until I saw headlights through the trees. I stumbled onto the road and waved my arms, screaming. A truck screeched to a stop. The driver jumped out, rushing toward me. "Ma'am!" "What happened?" I collapsed in his arms. My son," I gasped. "He tried to kill us." Those were the last words I remember before everything went dark. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. Bright lights, machines beeping, bandages everywhere. A nurse leaned over me, relief flooding her face. "You're safe now," she said softly. Safe. The word felt foreign. Then I asked the question I dreaded most. "My husband, Henry," she hesitated, just long enough to tell me everything. "He didn't make it," she said gently. My heart shattered all over again. The police came later that day. I told them everything, from the will, to the vacation, to the fall. They listened, skeptical at first, until I handed them Henry's phone. They played the recording right there in my hospital room. Damien's voice. "Is it done?" Melissa's reply. "Yes." "They're not moving." Then laughter. Soft, cold, final. The detective's expression changed instantly. They had all the proof they needed. Within hours, Damien and Melissa were arrested. They didn't resist. They didn't even act surprised. In fact, Melissa looked relieved, like the mask she'd worn for years had finally cracked. Damien said nothing, just stared at me across the courtroom days later. His eyes empty, cold, unreadable. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, he finally spoke. "You should have died that night, Mom." I looked right back at him and said, "You already did." Months passed. I recovered slowly, physically at least. Emotionally, I don't think I ever will. I sold the house, the furniture, everything that tied me to that cursed past, but I kept one thing. The small wooden cross Henry made years ago. I placed it in my garden, beneath the rosebush he planted for our anniversary. Sometimes I sit there at sunset, watching the light fade, listening to the wind whisper through the trees, and I think about how love can turn into something monstrous, how a child you raised with kindness can look into your eyes and still choose evil. But I also think about survival, about truth, about Henry, because even after everything, the lies, the loss, the betrayal, I survived. And as long as I'm alive, so is the truth.